biblical Earth, how the Earth explains phenomena through a biblical lens. If you are going to consider an alternative view to anything, really, you're not supposed to carry over preconceived notions or like ideas that you have about how you think something works or how you're currently viewing your reality. And this is something that is important to keep in mind because, like, for example, if you're trying to legitimately consider what the biblical Earth has to say to explain observations and phenomena, you're not going to want to bring over something like a sun that is 93 million miles away and supermassive, or supermassive, like 1,000 times bigger than the Earth, but still, really close. Like they say different things. The globe says that the sun is big and far away, and the biblical Earth says that the sun is close and small. And so it wouldn't make sense to carry over like a big sun, like the globe says, but then make it close, like the biblical Earth says. So there, you want to go into it with taking explanations for what they say and kind of at face value. Really, you just you have to explain phenomena. You do not. You just need to make sure that they do not conflict. Like you cannot explain something with a stationary sun, but then claim that the sun is moving to cover another phenomenon. You need to be consistent. This sun always needs to be doing what it's doing, or any natural process needs to go the way that it is without needing to completely alter itself to something it doesn't do to explain another event. There can't be conflict. Everything needs to jive smooth and together. There is one reality only. This is all a shared reality, one experience, and so there has to be one explanation for why things are. And so now that you can't consider outer space with a biblical Earth. They're not. It's not at all the claim. And trying to go after straw mans or trying to comprehend straw mans when trying to comprehend this will not help. So now that has kind of been set, hopefully that makes sense too. If it doesn't, please let me know so I can clarify this, because that's something that really needs to be understood and then overstood and comprehended with a firm grasp. So now with actual phenomena that we see, there are things that the one model will say one thing and another model will say another. For example, where they both claim the same thing. There are like flight routes to Australia from the United States, and they go kind of to the North Pole or towards, and then down south to Australia. And so if we look at both models, the globe explains with the Great Arc Route, and on a biblical Earth, it's a straight line. But they go over the same land, and you arrive at the same destination. So it's a similar explanation for both, where you are going north first and then south. It's the same, because it's explaining a plane. It's what's happening. The plane is going magnetically north and then shifting and going south to get to magnetic south, because Australia is out. South actually has OUT in it. So those are similar explanations. Now, if you have something like gravity, what we perceive as gravity, and what the initial resonance with people is when you mention gravity, why do things fall down? The globe says that matter is warping space-time curvature. I'm skeptical that that piece of fabric exists. If you could show me. You have this fabric that is being bent. And then so it creates a distortion or a warp in the fabric, and then things fall in and are attracted to one another. They fall in this wormhole of gravity well. So you have matter attracting matter, essentially. And that's why things fall down, is because the Earth pulls. Then this is kind of contradictory, because we don't actually call like a balloon anti-gravity. We call it floating. Buoyancy is why a balloon floats. So the globe actually has to use two explanations here, whereas a biblical Earth, it's just explained by buoyancy, by object medium relativity, relative density comparison. If the object is heavier than the medium, it will sink, and if it is lighter than the medium, it will float upwards and find its resting energy. Or their objects are always seeking the resting energy. So it doesn't in one explanation. But there you have one model saying gravity, the other model saying density or buoyancy, or what you want to call it. So there are times where there are similarities, there are times where there are differences, and you really do need to consider what each actual model is actually claiming, or what worldview is actually claiming. And so with that said, there are questions that people do raise when you bring this up, this topic, like, for example, ships. They disappear over curvature at about 3 miles. What we're told, what the official scientific understanding of this event is that the ship disappears over curvature, physical globe curvature. Now, when we take something that can zoom, some sort of telescope aperture, we zoom in and reveal this disappeared, quote unquote, ship, this boat that is over the curve at 3 miles. Now, that would fit the dimensions of what the globe is, with a circumference of 24,901 miles. That would give you the curvature to hide a 4-foot tall boat over about 6 feet of physical curvature. The thing is that we also make an observation that at 5 miles, something that is 1 foot high is still visible, not only at 5 but at 6, where the drop, by the way, of a globe with the size that we say that we know is there. Even between the 5 and 6 mile light, there would be 8 inches of curve alone. And if they're both 1 foot, that second light, compared just from if you were observing from the 5 mile light towards the 6 mile light, so a 1 mile observation, you would be 8 inches lower, so it would look like it's 4 inches above the ground rather than 12. But we see 5, 6, 7, 8 miles, a straight line of 1 foot lights, yet this curvature is enough to hide a boat which is 4 feet tall at 3 miles. So something that is taller is getting hidden closer from the lights that are further away and shorter. So this is a bit of a contradiction to the globe, and it actually goes to support what we see in architecture diagrams, blueprints, presentations of water, like with bridging or tunnels. We see that it is always portrayed as characteristically planar, horizontal at its surface, which matches the lights. And so the interpretation of the data is we see a line of lights, and curve and line are separate terms. Just because theoretical physics, which is actually hypothetical physics, it's not even theory, its hypothesis, its ideas. They're essentially like armchair quarterbacks. They're just speculating, and then they have mathematical equations. But you have these the hypothesis of something like the concept of curvilinear. So what is curvilinear? Those are mutually exclusive terms. You can't be curved and linear. You cannot have a straight line of water on a globe that is continuously curved, so that we observe a line falsifies that there is curve. So to match reality, you have to conform to planar water. Scientifically speaking, what we experiment and determine and demonstrate and determine and view and see and interpret as data, record as data, and then we interpret from there that yes, water is planar. And so this ship appears with zoom and also is contradicted by being curvature with these lights. So the ship does reappear though, and we do see things further away than we should with a globe at the given dimensions. And as far as like other ground claims, like why do we not see Europe from America, from the East Coast? And it's because the atmosphere, so you can see so far away, say call it your standard distance, how far away you can see. When you add like magnification and lensing, you see less around you and you can zoom in further, but it will get less defined. And so you keep zooming in and in and in, and eventually you're going to get to a point where you're seeing the sky, which has to come down because of perspective, and the ground, which has to go up because of perspective. They collide at your horizon, and that becomes a vanishing point. So you don't see anything beyond that. And so zooming in, you can get to your furthest out vanishing point, but the vanishing point is not far enough away where you can see America or Europe from America. And the atmosphere actually does act like a lens.
Science is the same of that of a lens. Here's a simple example.
So if you're looking at Chicago here, just maybe now you can just see the top of the Sears Tower, and if our simulated temperature inversion moves into place, hopefully now you can see pretty much all of Chicago,
see all the lower buildings,
including what's at ground level.
So the atmosphere really is like acting like a lens.
Yes.
And this does create distortion. You have these water molecules themselves, which block vision and block view if you put enough of them together, along with the dust and the debris and the everything in the air. These also block view and prevent you from seeing as far as you probably even could. I mean, we're definitely limited with all this blocking of these particles that add up over a long period. They say that there's like an inch of dust of particles in the atmosphere. It'd be like if it all collapsed to the ground, it would be like an inch thick or so. And you can't see through an inch of dust. If it's like that's like as thick as a door almost, and you don't see through a door. Also, going back to that boat thing real quick, if zooming doesn't view through physical curvature. If you had a camera and then you took out your phone camera, and you were going to take a picture of something far away, and you were going to zoom in on it, and I stuck a door right in front of your lens, you're not going to be able to zoom in, and suddenly you're seeing through the door. So that's like the boat, and that's even like with these dust particles in the air. You're not going to see through this physical obstruction. It's being obfuscated from your view, and so there's a limitation to how far we can see, and these long distances that we don't observe, and that the biblical Earth claims we can't observe, is because the explanation why we can't observe it is because it's beyond the furthest possible maximum vanishing point. So let's see, what else is there as far as, let's see, why we don't measure motion. Mechanical gyros don't detect motion, but they should. Even according to like the military explanations of gyros.
Modern high-performance aircraft require electric gyroscopic instruments. The turn and slip indicator, the attitude indicator, and the directional gyro. These electric instruments are dependable at extremely low pressures and temperatures, where gyro suction instruments are unreliable. This film will explain the theory of operation of some of the newer electric gyroscopic instruments. To understand any gyroscopic instrument, you must understand the principle of the gyroscope. It consists of a rotor mounted in a gimbal. The rotor can spin in one plane only. When another gimbal is added, a second plane of movement is possible. And when this assembly is mounted in bearings, the rotor has 3 planes of movement and can assume any possible attitude. This is now a freely mounted gyroscope. A spinning gyro has 2 important properties: precession and rigidity in space. All of its practical applications are based on these 2 properties. As for rigidity in space, the spinning rotor remains in its original attitude, while the gimbals and base move around it. In other words, the gyro maintains its axis in relation to space and not to the surface of the Earth. If a gyro moves around the Earth, its axis is vertical to the Earth's surface here, at an angle here, and horizontal here.
Light gyros can detect luminiferous ether rotation because light is what rotates above us. So light propagates and is affected by the ether. And so these waves do move and can pick up motion. And we do detect that with light, gyros, ether detecting gyros, ether sensitive gyros is what they would be. But mechanical, purely physical, gyros that would rely on the angular rotation of the globe, and after 6 hours we would rotate 90 degrees, so the axis of rotation would orient itself 90 degrees away from the housing of the that the gyro is contained within, because the gyro has precession and rigidity in space, so it will always hold its axis of rotation with respect to the housing that it is in, with the that it is essentially suspended in, and we show no motion. So that would explain that there is no motion.
It on this axis, and therefore, if now you put it on your boat or you put it in a plane, a missile for that matter, if you can never put a torque on the spinning wheel, and if the angular momentum for spin is in this direction, it will stay there forever and ever, assuming that we have no frictional losses. And if then the plane turns, the direction of the spin angular momentum will not change. But what will happen, of course, is that this yellow frame will rotate, or this black frame will rotate. And in these bearings here are shaft encoders, and they sense the rotation that the outer housing makes in order to keep this thing pointing in the same direction. And that signal is being fed back to the automatic pilot, and that keeps the plane flying in the direction that you want to. So you use as a reference all the time the spin angular momentum of your gyro, which is now mounted in such a way that you cannot put a torque on it even when the plane changes direction. And I want to show that to you. Okay, this is the direction of my spin angular momentum. And I'm the airplane. And I'm going to fly. Look at that spin angular momentum. It has no respect for me. It stays in the same direction no matter how I fly. And the error signals that come from the bearings of the yellow housing and the black housing, those arrow signals are fed back to the automatic pilot, and so the plane will stay on course.
The globe model claims that it's all relative, and that's why we don't feel any motion. That's why it is, it's relative, according to Einstein. He said there's nothing we can do to show motion that is required, because that is what is needed to match the observations that we have where our mechanical apparatuses measure zero motion. And when you get into, let's see, that's some ground stuff. Travel, I did mention one flight route, but you, like, as far as even circumnavigation, you can go east and west, which are clockwise, counterclockwise. If you think of the numbers on a analog clock, and you look at the minute hand or the second hand, it'll go do the minute hand. If you look at the minute hand, in 1 hour it will travel, even though the clock is flat. It will travel, even though the clock face is planar. It will travel. I don't know if they censor that word or not. The spiritual F word, really, honestly, because that word is very powerful. It gets to people. I think there's a tone to it for sure. But YouTube censors it. So I don't even know if I should mention that they do that, or they'll be like, oh, they're talking about censorship. They must be trying to skirt censorship. Anyway, so the clock is planar on its face, and it will return. The minute hand will return to the 12, circumnavigating the face of the clock, despite it being two-dimensional, and it will get back to its starting point. We can do that. Clockwise and counterclockwise are east and west. If you take a compass, it fixes to the North Pole only. We've only ever observed North Pole magnetic attraction with a compass. And if you turn that compass 90 degrees and you start heading in one direction, keeping your heading with the compass, you will travel in a circle and you will get back to where you started. This is east and west circumnavigation, which we do a lot, all the time, really. What would show what would actually be a proof of a globe would be, because it is an exclusive claim separate from the biblical Earth. If you started at the North Pole and went directly south to where the compass needle was pointing at you as you were walking away from the North Pole, you go straight all the way, going all terrain, over through anything. You head straight. You go through the South Pole directly. Show the compass needle flip to now pointing north, and you go straight right back to the North Pole. That's never been done. There are claims like One More Orbit, which was a crew, by the way, consisting of people that might have motivation to keep a biblical spiritual lie going, because this orbit had astronauts, military, royal family members. But if you look at these claims, they go to the South Pole, or one of the ceremonial South Poles, magnetic South Pole, geographical South Pole. They go to one of these and then they turn, they bank.
We're trying to set a world record.
It's the fastest time ever to go from one place on the Earth over both poles and back to the same point on the Earth, all in under 48 hours.
Calling themselves One More Orbit, their goal is to complete the fastest circumnavigation of the Earth via the North and South Poles in a business jet, and they're live streaming the whole thing.
We need to go far and fast. To fly around the Earth is a major undertaking. It's not something you can do by yourself.
What we were achieving was something that has never been achieved before.
The real challenge is making sure the refuels work very, very quickly.
The pit stops.
You could lose a huge amount of time if your refuel was too slow. There are no divert airfields in Antarctica in the midwinter.
Is this mission so important to me that I am happy to risk my life?
1 hour! 1 hour to take off!
And I'm such a tech nerd that yes. Yes, it is.
One of the problems with being an astronaut is that your bucket list gets too long, and there are so many beautiful places on the planet that you want to see. This is a beautiful business jet, except normally you don't live in an airplane.
You remember when we got ice cream on board ISS?
Yes. We chose the Kennedy Space Center as the location for our launch, where Apollo left from 50 years ago.
I didn't even know satellites could do this.
I figured you must have some engineer and some really good technical people even to make the Wi-Fi work.
One More Orbit, Gulfstream G650ER is not going to slow down for anybody. Okay, so this guy is catching up.
Yannicka and Magdalena are probably the only two living females on the planet that have circumnavigated the poles.
They don't go straight. They turn around and go back even sometimes. It's like running, the pacer test, where you just go to the line and go back. Like, that's what they did, essentially. They run across the court and then run right back to where they started. They don't go straight through. So circumnavigation is possible. And so now this clockwise and counterclockwise, you have for the seasons, you have the sun going in between the tropics. The sun will always be overhead between the tropics only in both models. Now, a biblical Earth will say that the inner circle is a smaller circuit, and the sun will travel 15-degree heading at all times, rotating with the constant rotation speed of the ether, but it makes bigger and smaller circles, traveling faster or slower, but keeping its 15-degree per hour heading, which is what we always observe. And so the sun, when it's in the north, in the inner circle, it's more concentrated. The source is more local. It doesn't have to cover as much distance. It's not as open an expanse of coverage. And so when the sun is overhead in the the inner tropic, that's when it is, spring and summer, the summertime here in the north, and vice versa in the south, where the sun is more spread out, and further away from the north, it's cool here and it becomes winter. And back and forth it goes, crossing through the equator for the equinox twice a year. and that's the intersection point of the solar analemma. And this actually matches the solar analemma. And so that is how you get the seasons. And then I should even say like day and night. So the sun and the moon are their own light source. The moon does not reflect sun. That's why, like, when the moon is red during a lunar eclipse, you will, it's red because that's the moon giving off its own light. The moon is designed to every so often on its cycle, on its full extent of its lunar cycle, there are time periods where it turns red, and it's calculatable because we can predict with it, like the Soros cycle, because the sun and moon were for, like, the moon was for the months, and they're for signs and seasons and such, biblically speaking. Not that you're supposed to interpret that stuff like the stars and all that, astrology. Well, that's not something that we're supposed to do, because why would you go to the stars when you can go to the one that made the stars? So the sun and moon are for the sun is for the day, the moon is for the time of day, the moon is for the time of the month, and the stars are for the time of the year. And you see the stars that you see overhead depend on where you are. If you are in the northern hemisphere, you will see, or if you're directly under Polaris, Polaris will be your zenith, your overhead star, and you will see out 90 degrees, or you'll see towards the equator, and then you will get cut off because of your vanishing points and where the sky meets the ground. The sky has a vanishing point too, but it's further away, much further away than the close ground, because the ground comparatively is so much closer. We can see 3 miles of ground, give or take, but we can see 12,000 miles of stars because they're elevated. And actually, when you elevate, you get less change in angular size and these things, which explains why the sun stays a circle and everything. There are some more, for people who try to deconstruct biblical Earth, they try to get into more things. I'm just trying to keep like a surface, but know that the deeper things do have like angular resolution and angular size and all that do have explanations.
For the information above my eye line, the descent rate is now steeper, just like with the bottles, but I have less of an angular compression rate, right? The angles are more open. So these angle pairs, the 8s or the 1s or the 11s, etc., must always remain in proportion, but diminish together according to the ceiling or floor distance. If one angle decreases, the other increases, but they are both diminishing with distance. Theta is never met along the top, again, because the horizon distance is set by the bottom. It occupies 50% of my vision, so wherever the information above my eye line is at that point, when these two halves collapse, is what I see above my eye line in my perspective. The top continues on independently, but you will never see the objects diminish in size and reach theta along the top because they will have already set into your lower horizon. They are gone to your vision. Note also the steeper descent rate at the top. The higher the ceiling, the steeper the descent rate within our perspective. This is how our brain interprets it. The nearest ceiling or floor sets our horizon. Similarly, the nearest wall would set the vertical vanishing line if we were up against a long wall, let's say. So if we collapse our diagram here and we press the image downward and along the top and upward along the bottom to reach a essentially horizontal line. So you see that along the bottom, the angle 8 doesn't have to travel very far to get to the purple line, but the angle 8 above has to travel quite a bit more to do that. But essentially what you're left with is basically what we see in perspective as I've depicted here in the upper right. You have the larger angles, resolution angles along the top, and a steeper descent rate characterized by the orthogonal lines. And along the bottom, you have more compressed angles and those closer transversal lines and more stabilized or shallower orthogonal lines. You also have the object larger to start out with, but then gets rapidly smaller with distance because of the how close in proximity those transversal lines are. And along the top, you have the object start out smaller, but it remains relatively stable because the angular size compression rate is not as great. So the angles remain somewhat large as it descends away from you. And it maintains its relative size for the most part. And at the end, it will eventually set into the horizon. So, as you probably have guessed, the sun is a practical example of this. The sun and moon set because they travel a short distance in a straight line along the very high upper boundary. If we extend our ceiling to a tremendous height, you see that the rate of differential angular compression between the floor and the apparent ceiling is large, and the descent rate steepens dramatically. So the object descends to the vanishing line rather quickly while maintaining a relatively constant resolution angle as it travels. It therefore does not experience an appreciable change in size. Once it hits the lower horizon, it sets. Again, this occurs without the object having to travel very far because it is so high up, and without an appreciable change in size. Stated another way, the higher something is, the less it changes in appearance. The distance it has to travel before it sets is dictated by how far we are seeing below the eye line, which is, in most cases, about 3 miles. This is for a diffraction-limited system, but remember there are aberrations and refraction effects within the atmosphere that can alter the size of objects and distort them.
All right, now let's see what happens when we add in our atmospheric magnification. Again, water and refraction. Water causes magnification and refraction, right? So let's bring the sun back. Oh, check this out. Refraction bends the light downward. It made the sun set on a parallel surface. As it was moving parallel, the same height, the whole way over a flat surface, the refraction caused the sun to set. Not only that, well, let's bring in the beginning of that little test, and we see that it maintained pretty much the same size, too. Of course, that's because as it's moving away, the magnification is still taking place, and so even though the sun's further away than it was in the beginning of the test, the magnification basically preserved the same size, and the refraction made it set.
But you have as you go out from being, as you walk out from under Polaris, your stars will shift. Polaris will start moving down behind you as you walk towards the equator, and those stars that were on the equator will start to rise up as they appear overhead. And then you will start to see, depending on where you are, is how much sky you can see. You can see, looking up above you, and that the 12,000 mile thing was, complete guess. The biblical Earth doesn't claim to know precisely how far away the sun, moon, and stars are, like man-made heliocentric ideas. So that's something to keep in mind, that there's, we can only claim so much. We can only observe so much, test so much, do so much, measuring so much. So we will look up, you will look up and see X amount of sky. If you think of the sky as a hemisphere, which is how it's or as a dome, which is how it's portrayed even in planetariums and whatnot, you can see, say, X 10,000 miles of sky or something like that. And wherever you are on the Earth determines what 10,000 mile segment, circumference of or diameter of sky it would be, diameter, whatever 10,000 mile diameter of sky you have above you. So that's why we see the stars that we see depending on where we are, and then the moon giving off its own lights. The sky is blue because there's water above us, according to the Bible, and the globe says that it's because light is scattered so that only blue light can get through. It's essentially a monofrequency filter that turns the wavelength turns the wavelength to one frequency that makes it through, which is blue light, which is what we see. And so like the sunlight is white light and it gets filtered into just blue. Now, if the sun was bouncing off of the moon and going through the moon, it would be appearing blue. The light would get filtered out to be blue. Everything should be blue, essentially, because everything's getting filtered. It's all coming through the same filter. And that you would have to, like with the globe, the stars, they twinkle. And our sun is supposed to be just another star. Why does our sun never twinkle? It's the same photons going through the same atmosphere. Well, it's the same, it's photons going through the same atmosphere. And light is a constant, so where's the change? You have the sun giving its light, the moon giving its light. Life reacts differently between both, and things like this, different characteristics. And they go above us. They never go under. There's no underside to the earth that the sun and moon visit for their times and then come back up overhead. There's no waterfalls over the edge. The ice wall is Antarctica, the coastline of Antarctica, which goes all the way around. And if you have like a cup or a bowl of something, like if you have a cup of water with ice in it, the water goes around, but the lip of the cup keeps the water contained. And the ice would be like the land masses. And we can go around those land masses. And so you have sun and moon going around above, seasons, days, times, years, all that. Let's see. I don't know what else is there. Let's see. The twinkling of the sun, it doesn't twinkle. The stars do, but they're supposed to all be stars, giant nuclear furnaces in a vacuum. Let's see. Pressure gradient. There's a pressure gradient on the Earth. There's no non-barrier or non-vacuum next to vacuum without a barrier, which is not demonstratable, by the way. But pressure drops because denser molecules, more dense molecules and particles, they have an easier time being down here. And as you go up in elevation, things need to have a greater energy or a lower density to stay up and to maintain being up.
And then add some vinegar. Wow. Look at all those bubbles. So this fills up the pitcher with carbon dioxide. So wait for it to fill up for a few seconds. And then watch this. Just dump it out onto the candles and watch them go out. That's cool.
And so as you go higher and higher, less and less is able to sustain these higher demands. And so you get less and less until you get to where the pressure can become undetectable and be zero. And this works. It's just like a density tower. So gases are liquid, or gases are fluids, just like liquids. So scientifically speaking, they take the shape of their container, and water. So water is on a globe would be required to curve, and no matter the shape of the basin that the water is in, it would be required to curve at its surface. Yet what we observe is that water is planar despite the basin that it is in, lake or ocean or what have you. And it's planar no matter how the contour of and the topography of the floor of the body of water is, of the basin. Gradual or sharp drops, or mounds, whatever, valleys, trenches, anything, the surface, the fluid takes the shape of the container and the surface stays level. The thing about gases is they're actually maybe even more of a truer fluid because they fill the entire volume of the container top to bottom, where a liquid can only fill the container as much as the volume of liquid there is. It will fill the lowest space possible and rise upwards evenly. And so you get these pressure gradients. Talked about gravity, anti-gravity, flotation, that. There would be like, I guess even you could go as far, this isn't really natural character, well, kind of natural, but like with NASA and satellites, they send up balloons, and which are satelloons. A lot of our communications is primarily done through underground cable. And then you have these balloons and buoys and everything as relay stations as well. Not actually, they're not in orbit. You don't orbit above us. Now, there is one thing, there's a lot of like UFOs and stuff, which I don't really get into, or UAPs for the nomenclature, according to Hillary Clinton. I don't know if I should say that or not. But all that stuff is military technology, and that's what the ISS is. There aren't people in the ISS. There is the ISS there's a full mock-up in a pool for spacewalks. There are green screens, blue screens, wires, CGI glitches, sloppiness in terms of like they will spray water around in there to demonstrate being in space, but then or in zero G and all that. But then there's like all these exposed wires and everything. You think it would be neat. Like aren't IT places, if you work in like a computer lab or something, aren't all the cords and cables like strapped together? You get like this thick mass of 100 bound like yellow cords that are all running in one direction. It looks like a cord pipe basically. But on the ISS, it's all chaotic and messy and everywhere, and they're just spraying water around and all this. There's tons of CGI. Spacesuits, by the way, would have to maintain 15 psi to keep the body, where it needs to be. And if you had a spacesuit that had 15 psi on the glove, you would need to essentially be able to move your fingers like trying to squeeze like a metal plate that has a resistance of like 120 pounds of squeeze or so, give or take. So like, could you squeeze that with, your fingers? The suit would have to be so rigid. So the ISS is military technology, how it's up there, this or that. There are also cuts in the live feed. And actually, if you look at the live feed, because of perspective, things that are further away travel slower, and things that are closer, it's kind of like the Doppler. Things that are closer will appear to move faster. And on the ISS feeds, the speeds of distant points versus closer points is uniform. There are bubbles in space. But what the ISS is, how it's staying up there, there's something called quantum locking or quantum levitation. And they could be fixing this thing to some, suspending it up in this field, having maybe something to do with magnetism. There's lots of stuff out there, but they could be quantum locking and basically just sending it around. I've gone a bit into like NASA as far as like the pictures. A picture, here's the thing is that if you took a camera, one camera, even GoPro or not, but preferably not, just to avoid even having to have that discussion, because lots of GoPros can't take straight line or curved lines and straighten them out, by the way. And with GoPro correction, and even during GoPro transition from convex to concave, we can see a straight line, which shows that the horizon is straight. But if you took a camera, put it on a rocket, and sent this rocket straight up, straight into outer space, or the globe claim even is if you have to arc it and get up to speed and traject yourself out, you keep this one camera on a live feed and never cut away and show it going from ground straight all the way through one clean, continuous shot all the way into outer space where you can see curve and then see the ball. That would prove a globe. NASA's never done it. They admit that all their stuff is CGI, that they have to Photoshop, that they are interpreting flat strips of data with gaps in between them and editing those in and blending them together and stitching them together. that they have to do all this type of stuff to portray flat strips of data as a round CGI computer-generated image, graphically edited, stitched together cartoon, essentially. And they admit this stuff. So briefly is you can't have, I'm skeptical that there can be a vacuum next to a non-vacuum. Can you demonstrate it? What will someone who is a globe advocate will say is no, it's undemonstrable because you need something that is the size of a planet to have the gravity to be able to hold molecules in and not let them get homogenized by a vacuum, because the vacuum is trying to homogenize everything and spread out particles as much as possible. And if you pump them out of a vacuum, then the few remaining particles have to spread out further and further, become more and more sparse, and that would happen to our atmosphere. So they can't demonstrate that, and you need to have a barrier in between all vacuums. I think that's most claims that I can think of that people bring up, and I'm trying to think of, like, NASA has tried to say like 10 reasons why the Earth isn't biblical, and I'm trying to just go off of some of those and everything and what people might suspect. I think I covered vision, ground, objects floating, falling, sky phenomenon, circumnavigation, travel. NASA, space, pictures. I think that's pretty much about everything I can think of right now. And that should hopefully, because I'm going to put like videos in here that you'll have already watched by now. This will maybe be kind of long, but hopefully this is something that you can watch and say that if I'm going to be open-minded, this covers these explanations. Now I actually want to ask you, if you're on the fence, where are your doubts about why the Earth isn't biblical? Like, what's like causing you to not be able to, like, what would be a holdup for you, essentially? What is like, well, the Earth could be biblical, but what about this, and this? Like, if you could help me out with that, please do, because I want to, try to get at these things. And the Earth being biblical is very important because this puts the creator of the Bible, Jesus, directly, the creator of this earth and the creator, the maker of the Bible and of all that is this reality. Jesus is right above us. And evolution is not even possible on a biblical earth. So this would change people from thinking that they're animals without purpose to being specially made in the center of everything. And we have a creator that loves us, and so much so that we can call upon our creator by name, and Jesus. And there, people will say like that the people love to hear their name be said, and our creator wants us to call him by his name, by Jesus. And we can know Jesus. We can have a personal relationship with our creator with faith. You have to genuinely have this faith, and that the earth is biblical is a tremendous indicator that the Bible is absolutely true. I would say to you, if you're still trying to consider this, take all these observations. Okay, the earth is planar, is not moving. Now what? What if we have just always existed, or this or that? Because it becomes like a realm almost, which sounds kind of fantasy, but the truth is stranger than fiction and then fantasy. And so you would say, well, what is all this now? But the thing is that the Bible can be validated retroactively when you analyze the evil liars that do this. It would have to be a spiritual lie. No one would gain from lying about the cosmology. You could probably tell a smaller lie that is more directly and physically beneficial than having to lie about the shape of the earth. Only the dark entity of the devil, Satan, Lucifer would lie about this, and it's to mislead us away from Jesus. And the devil wants to do anything, as long as you're doing anything but having faith in Jesus and following Jesus and developing your relationship with Jesus and your fellow man. As long as you're not doing those things, the devil doesn't mind what you do. The devil will tell you any of your, things that keep you away from this are good, and that's what we need. And he'll try to validate this with science and with this or that or chemicals, or your mind is just chemicals and it's all natural. And if you want to attack, well, animals do it. If you want to hurt, well, animals do it. If you want to go after something, animals do it, or whatever it may be. But they want to keep you in this fallen state, keep you away from Jesus Christ, who can elevate you greater than anything can, because Jesus loves you unconditionally, no matter what you've done or what you think or this or that, because people fear God. People will try to deny this stuff. Some people will, because they don't want Jesus to be real, because they think that they will be condemned and go to hell forever, when that is even more of a litmus test than asking about Noah's Ark and how many animals were taken, because the Bible expressively and emphatically is that Jesus loves you and forgives you of your sin. We were born into a fallen world. We are forgiven. If you don't understand that you are forgiven by Jesus and for his atonement and what he did for humanity, if you do not understand this and comprehend this to its fullest, then you don't know what the Bible says if you're worried about hell or punishment or this or that. We are to try to live as godly a life as possible, we're try to live as much of a life as Jesus set the example for us as possible. And God, Jesus, and I think it's even better to use Jesus's name, Jesus, than calling him God. I mean, Jesus is, all wise, so knows when you're calling upon him. But having this relationship with Jesus is what saves you. You will start to. All you need to do is have faith in Jesus, and your life will turn around. These things that if you drink all the time or this or that, you will start to turn away from it and say, I don't need this. I don't want this. I want to do other things that are, help. You just make a better imprint on the world. You're going to go be more social, hang out with friends more. Like say someone drinks alone or something like that, and they're drinking. The alcohol is going to be less satisfying, and they're going to say, I want to go out with, be out with people and socialize and go visit, walk in nature, and really look at the detail of creation. And things change. It will change you, especially having Jesus above your head, knowing that Jesus is close and not infinitely far away and expanding and getting further away, if real at all, which evolution is trying to. Atheists have, declared and made titles and movies and all this stuff, books. God is dead. But Jesus defeated death. Jesus will not die. Jesus cannot die. So when we look into the world, to validate the Bible retroactively, we see that this evil entity that would lie about this, and for these reasons to remove us and separate us from Jesus, we see the devil is in the details of the globe. We look at the globe and see that it is 66.6 degree tilt. The devil tries to tell us 23.4 to hide it. But if upright is considered 90 degrees and you subtract 23.4 for the tilt, you're left with 66.6 degrees from the horizon as opposed to the vertical. So we have a 666 there. The Earth also is said to go around the sun at 66,600 miles an hour, which is a 666, and orbit is defined as continuous falling. That sounds like a bottomless pit continuous falling around fire. So maybe the devil trying to prelude or the devil's own cosmology preluding the devil and the fallen angels' demise. Another thing too, hell was made for the fallen angels, the ones who rebelled and tricked mankind, the people at the very top that we've probably never even met, been in the same room as, or anything like that. These evil people that cause the war and cause the famine and dismantle families and try to hit people at one another and all of this stuff. It's, God knows, Jesus knows our heart, and we really need to get people to Jesus. People can change for the better, and we need to do everything we can to get this out to people, because this can change people. This changes your whole mind. You go from an animal to a human being, from there being no God to being a creator who loves you and wants a unconditionally loving relationship with you, which is beyond special. And it's a part of what every day is a blessing. And so you have like even another, like these six sixes are set up everywhere, and only the Bible claims that this number is of any significance of evil people who would actually even want to even lie to you. So you have the continuous falling and all that, and the tilt. And now you also have, what is the dimensions of a globe? Well, every mile of globe surface that you traverse, there is 8 inches of curvature drop. 8 inches of curvature is 0.666 feet. So that's another 666. And every 10 miles or every increment of 10, that decimal just keeps moving, but the 6 remains. And now we look at the Washington Monument, 666 inches at the base by 6,660 inches tall. This country of young Babylon, young Egypt, Mesopotamia, or whatever you want to call it, Babylon though, really, and now America, was set up by these people that are, patient and doing this long drawn out a spiritual attack in the spiritual war. They're doing this on humanity, and America has been set for this. And now we have the barcode too, which has a 666 in it. All standard barcodes that aren't on like fruit have a 666 indicator. The barcode language has each line, different set of lines, or if it's a single line, represents a numeric value between 0 and 9. And the 6 is always the 2 skinny parallel lines, and those 2 skinny parallel lines are made longer, and they're at the very beginning, the very middle, and the very end, or the beginning, middle, and end. Very doesn't really need to be in there, but it's for emphasis. The beginning, middle, and end of each barcode has these long parallel lines that stick down, and that is a 666. This enemy is set up all around us, and these people in power that keep us against one another and keep us from going against them, because they can't have the masses getting to them, and if we went at them instead of each other, they would be stopped. Especially, only will it happen with the teachings of Jesus, with the Bible. That's how these people are defeated. Jesus defeated these people at the cross 2,000 years ago. And they were defeated before, like Aaron could turn the sand to bugs, and the Pharaoh's magicians and sorcerers and warlocks could not. And they were, our creator, Jesus, is more powerful than any of the wicked, and that's why we can communicate with this stuff. That's why the enemy tries so hard to censor all of this. It is because this stuff is absolutely devastating to their goals and their motives. If the earth is empirically flat and if the earth is empirically biblical, there's no outer space. If there's no outer space and long timelines, there's no evolution. If there's no evolution, there is no missing link. And the missing link they try to get us on with evolution, when you're, especially if you're going to school for like paleontology or anything, or archaeology, or fossils, geology, this and that, the missing link they get you to focus on is the past missing link. Where is man to monkey? And we have thousands and thousands and millions of transitions. We're more and more solving, getting to this middle missing link and all that. But the missing link that is important, the spiritual missing link, is the Luciferian missing link, is the future. What do we become? Do we become aliens? Do we become these big-headed, brainy, ethereal beings? That's what the fallen angels want to disguise themselves as, is these wise beings that are, millennia old and, 5-dimensional consciousness, traveling through Neuralink or the databases of the cosmos or anything like that. They want to this is part of getting mankind to go towards like transhumanism and taking ultimately the mark of the beast, which is 666. The devil is trying to set things up so that mankind will take this, and is trying to set the stage as best as the devil can. And the globe is absolutely essential to this. This is a spiritual debate, conversation, and the debate stops if you're open-minded, because immediately the evidence and the data is provided that the earth is empirically flat and fixed, empirically biblical, and that stops the debate. It's now a knowledge. It is a measured knowledge of our understanding, according to our apparatuses, that the earth is planar and not moving. So that means that there definitely is a lie, because we definitely are taught that the earth is not planar in academics. And the earth being planar and the center of creation is far more important and crucial than evolution. So the earth, it all points towards Jesus. No matter where you start, you will end knowing, and the Bible says, if people don't change and the world progresses down the ways that it's going, look who we have in office and what this person is able to do on video and get away with. You better believe I'm about to play it, just so you know. These people are against us, these secret society members. These people are the enemy, and if the Bible says that every knee will bow and every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is the Savior, is the King. And these people will try to lead as many as they can towards their fate, towards the fallen angel's fate. Jesus, though, will not put any person in hell who doesn't belong there. And how could people go to hell? You can't have someone like Jeffrey Dahmer or any of these serial people that only think about hurting and harming and, being gruesome to their fellow man, and will, if they get the opportunity, no matter what. These people cannot be going around in heaven, because there will not be harm in heaven. So Jesus knows more than us. And we should never judge. We have to love people unconditionally, even if we disagree with them here or there or about what, pray for them. And, we need to be loving. We can't be insulting people. We can't be putting people down, can't be judging. Let Jesus do the judging. What a difficult job. Jesus weeps every time one individual, think about this. Jesus weeps when one individual does one thing, that is saddening to Jesus. Like if one person goes out one night and goes on a wild bender and just destroys their body, like with alcohol, Jesus weeps. But this weeping is coming from someone who has infinite depth, to the bottom of infinite depth of sadness and comprehension and understanding. And so Jesus's weeping is on a magnitude we can't even comprehend, that level of sadness. Jesus wants us to return to him out of genuine choice of free will, much like with two spouses. If you have your husband, as a husband, if you have a wife and she says she loves you, you want her to tell you that genuinely, and for her to be meaning it, not because she has to tell you or is forced to tell you or anything. It needs to be genuine. And this is how we need to return to Jesus genuinely. All the world's, the results of sin is death. So all this death and things that are precursors to death are here because we've fallen away and chosen to do things that are against our design. All death is preventable in choice, just about. Other than accidents. You can't shoot someone if, someone can't get shot if no one's shooting, and you can't get heart disease if you don't have plaque lining your arteries. So, a lot of this stuff is preventable, and Jesus Christ's teachings are the way. One way or another, Jesus Christ, he or his teachings, Jesus will prevail. Always. There's nothing that the enemy can do. And you do not need to be fearful for yourself, because Jesus loves you. Jesus's mercy and grace are, maximum. And so with unconditional love. So, and that's the whole point of this lie, and the how, part of the how, the why, the what. It's biblical. It's all biblical. And they don't want you to know Jesus. The world doesn't want you to know Jesus, and the Bible, which is the opposite of the world, says that we are blessed enough to be able to have a loving relationship with our Creator, with Jesus. So thank you so much for allowing me to have this much of your time. Hopefully this helped answered quite a bit. So as far as the explanations go, really though, the important thing is that Jesus Christ loves you unconditionally. Jesus Christ be with you all. Have a blessed day from our blessed, loving Creator. Glory be to Jesus Christ. Thank you all so much. And yeah, unconditional love, it really solves all. So Jesus Christ be with you all.